Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. At UFC 293, Israel Adesanya versus Sean Strickland. We learned a lot based on all the different performances on the card, and this is going to be my top 3 takeaways from UFC 293. I'm going to start with some honorable mentions. I have quite a few, and then I'm going to go from 3 to 1, 1 being my most notable takeaway from the card. Starting off with my first honorable mention, and that is that Tai Tuivasa is done for. I already felt like this was the case, but after 293, it further cements this. I mean, he's on a 3-fight losing streak, has been stopped in all 3 fights, and the sad thing is he's taken so much damage. He fought Alexander Volkov, got destroyed in the first round, arguably 10-8 it, then in the second round got dominated some more, and eventually gets Ezekiel choked, and you look at the fight before that, got first round KO from Sergey Pavlovich. You look at the fight before that, got TKO'd against Cyril Gane. And in all these fights, he's just taken significant damage. Even in the Derek Lewis fight, he took some damage. So I already knew that Tai Tuivasa was never going to be a champion, but now he's kind of relegated to the back half of the heavyweight top 15, which isn't very good to begin with. I mean, this is a very shallow division, but he's taken so much damage. I'm just waiting for, now it's going to be like every fight he's getting his lights shut off. I don't know what the UFC does with him next. Maybe they book a Derek Lewis rematch, revive one of their careers, which will be a fun fight to repeat. But Tai Tuivasa, he just relies too much on power. That's really all he has. And you can get away with a lot in the heavyweight division just solely based off of power. But when you get towards the top of the heavyweight division, it doesn't work as well against some of these guys that are more skilled, like Cyril Gane or somebody like Tom Aspinall. You know, I think back to Tai Tuivasa fought Greg Hardy, who's literally a bum, and he got rocked badly by Greg Hardy. And had Greg Hardy not rushed in and got KO'd himself, there's a chance Greg Hardy has a win over Tai Tuivasa. And you look at Tuivasa's winning streak before he started on his losing streak against Cyril Gane last year. He beat Derek Lewis, not that good of a win. Beat Augustus Sakai, not that good of a win. Beat, Greg Hardy, not that good of a win. Beat Harry Hunsucker. I mean, seriously, this is the worst win streak I've ever seen. Stefan Struve on his way out. Worst win streak I've ever seen. Heavyweight division isn't that good. He's on a 3-fight losing streak and taking significant damage. I think he's done. I think he's done for. I don't think we'll ever see a real career resurgence from Tai Tuivasa. Moving on to my next honorable mention, and this I'm going to talk about with something else on the list as well. But Sean Strickland was massively underrated. And, I talked about this in the lead up to the fight because I've been underrating Strickland for a while myself, but I could have never guessed that he could pull off an upset like this. And because he talks a lot and because he kind of has a weird style that's not super aesthetically pleasing, a lot of people kind of overlook his skills. He has very good striking. And, he kind of just plots forward and it's unassuming. But he went out there and just implemented the perfect game plan against Israel Adesanya. And now he's the UFC middleweight champion. I mean, talk about underrated. I picked him to lose against Abus Magomedov. Now, I like that pick watching the first round. But then, of course, Abus Magomedov has no cardio. The real question is, how good is first round Abus Magomedov? That's what I want to know. Because he looked incredible against Strickland in the first round. But Strickland, he's not only underrated, but just to add on this, I mean, his coach, Eric Nixick, how good is he? Because the game plan and the adjustments that Strickland made in this fight, the way he was checking kicks, the way he was just kind of moving forward, being aggressive but not over-aggressive, and walking into Israel Adesanya's kind of comfort zone of guys getting over-aggressive, overreaching, and countering him was super impressive. And I feel like the MMA community as a whole, as well as myself, massively underestimated Sean Strickland going into this fight. And my last honorable mention, I know people are going to complain about this one in the comments, but I had to put this in the video as well. MMA fans love the use of homophobic slurs. And me personally, I'm not offended by any words at all, but I think it's weird when a bunch of grown men obsess over other grown men's sexuality. And I know that's not necessarily what Charles Radke or Manel Kopp was doing it. They were just using it as an insult, essentially. And I don't necessarily, I'm not going to sit here and clutch my pearls over it. But what I find particularly weird is, and this has always been my complaint, when stuff like this happens, people cheerlead this type of behavior. They like this type of behavior. They want more of this type of behavior. For me, I'm like, that's not really the best thing to say. I really don't appreciate it. I don't like it. but it is what it is. These guys are cage fighters. That's my thought process. But when a lot of the MMA community hears these types of words, they're like, oh yeah, they're rubbing their hands together and they're like, oh, I really want to hear more of that. And I just think it's really bizarre how focused they are on use of these types of words. I made a video last week where I mentioned it in a video. I got so much heat. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. The fans aren't like this. And sure enough, all of them, I mean, it was a unanimous, and I know people are going to complain down in the comments right now, but it was unanimous in support of the use of these words by Charles Radke, by Manel Kopp, and I just find it weird that they really want them to use these types of words. It's not even the fact that they said them, which I don't particularly like, but again, I'm not clutching my pearls over it, but Charles Radke, and we're going to talk about this in another video, the fact that he did it after the performance he had was even more embarrassing. At least Manel Kopp had a really cool call out and a really great fight and a really good performance. But nonetheless, the MMA community cheerleads it. They really like it. If I wanted to grow a little bit faster, I think I would start throwing out some homophobic slurs on stream, throw them out on videos, maybe mix in some racial epithets as well. But it just it didn't shock me completely. But the amount of support, the unwavering support for it was, I mean, it was more than I even thought. And I already knew this was, you know, a thing in the MMA community, and I talked about it in a video I made last week where everyone in the comments said it doesn't exist. Moving on to my actual list, starting off with number 3, and I'm so happy that I can say this in a video. Laura Sanko's commentary is unbelievable. She is better than Joe Rogan. Hot take, Sanko is better than Rogan. Her commentary was excellent. She focused on the actual fights. She understands the rules. She understands the scoring criteria. I remember one fight, I think it was actually Charles Radke versus Blood Diamond, where they were acting like there's no way Radke loses when all Radke was doing was clinching. And Sanko reminded DC, well, it's damage-based scoring. So, you know, it depends how they look at the knees and the clinch and some of the damage that Blood Diamond's done. I believe it was that fight. But it's so refreshing rather than hearing Joe Rogan speculate about injuries and, you know, everything else he does. All he does basically is just lean back and grab his commentary partners and make his eyes look like they're going to pop into their head for the reaction cam. And could you imagine, thank God this was in Australia, could you have imagined if Rogan was on commentary, he would have made the entire fan base believe that Adesanya won that fight. He would have said, oh, the feints of Adesanya, the footwork of Adesanya. He would have been so biased. I'll never forget the Adesanya versus Blachowicz commentary. And it was just, I mean, it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. They were acting like the feints of Adesanya was somehow winning him the fight. I am so glad that we had Sanko on commentary rather than Rogan. I know people are going to disagree with that as well, but I would much rather have her on every single pay-per-view over Joe Rogan, just, you know, speculating on injuries. He would have been saying Adesanya's got a broken rib, the way he's holding that right pinky toe, he's not walking on it correctly. I think something's wrong with his eye. I think something's wrong with his left butt cheek. Rogan would have been throwing out every excuse in the book, but then he also would have acted like, yeah, I think this is going to be a very tough fight to score. Maybe Adesanya might have got it done. He might have got the 3rd, 4th, and 5th rounds. That's what Rogan would have been saying. And I'm happy instead we had Sanko, who seems like she actually lives in reality. She's actually watching what's going on. Sometimes I'm listening to this commentary, whether it's Michael Bisping or Rogan, even DC sometimes as well. It feels like they're not actually watching the fights. It feels like they're not actually paying attention. And sometimes they're talking about meaningless stuff while the fight's going on. While there's important moments going on in the fight, they're talking about other stuff. Sanko, I want her on more pay-per-views. Honestly, I'm looking forward to every UFC pay-per-view that is outside the country. Please, UFC, please, MMA gods, put Sanko on commentary for UFC 294 in Abu Dhabi. She did an excellent job on the card, and I look forward to seeing her do more commentary in the future. Moving up on the list to number 2, and that is that Strickland versus Adesanya 2, the immediate rematch will be next. I believe for 100% certainty that this fight will be next. Dana White already alluded to it in the post-fight. I did an entire video discussing this and who I think should get the fight and what the UFC will actually do. But I don't necessarily agree with this fight, but I do kind of understand why the UFC would make it. But I'm sure the UFC is going to make it, okay? Dana White there is fighters that have Dana White privilege. There is without a doubt fighters that have the privilege. And we've never seen it given to Adesanya because Adesanya's kind of been champion for a long time. And really there's no special treatment per se you can give a champion. But because Adesanya is so popular, because he's a former champion, because I mean, not even necessarily popular, but drawing power itself, because of that, the UFC and Dana White are going to want to get him into immediate rematch right away. And also, Dana White took a shot at Dricus du Plessis in the post-fight presser, talking about, you guys got to take these title opportunities when you get offered them. You know, look at Strickland. He took it. He wasn't even supposed to get this fight, and now he's the champion. And that was a shot at Dricus. I don't think the UFC is going to be going out of their way to give Dricus du Plessis a title shot. It's not going to happen. I truly believe it will be Sean Strickland versus Israel Adesanya 2. Probably UFC 300. The UFC loves building up these rematches of long-reigning champions. Again, I know Adesanya isn't technically a long-reigning champion, but you get the point. And we've seen this, and I've complained about it all of 2023. We have so many undeserved title fights happening in 2023. Not all of them are official yet, but just to name a few, Stipe Miocic getting the fight against John Jones. So we're getting John Jones versus Stipe Miocic. We're also getting Leon Edwards versus Colby Covington. We're also probably getting Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Chito Vera. None of them are warranted. A lot of people are cheerleading those. A lot of people are saying, Colby Covington's a draw. Colby Covington deserves a title shot just based off being a draw, which is just factually incorrect and not supported by any evidence. But a lot of people cheerleaded that. A lot of people cheerleaded Marlon Vera getting a title shot potentially against Sean O'Malley, which isn't official yet. So I don't want to hear those same people complain when Israel Adesanya gets a rematch with Sean Strickland, even though I believe the true number one contender is Dricus du Plessis. But after seeing that press conference, and before that, I already knew pretty much I thought the UFC was going to give Adesanya a rematch. It's just the star power. It's the fact that he's been a champ for a while, and it's the fact that he's stayed active and always been there willing to fight for the UFC. Adesanya's a company man for Dana White. Dana White loves that. You know, you can talk about, you can have fighters throw out homophobic slurs on the mic, but don't talk about fighter pay. Don't talk about fighter pay. Then you end up, Adesanya's been a company man. He steps in there. He doesn't speak badly of the UFC. He steps in there and fights and main events cards. And on top of that, he sells pay-per-views. He is undoubtedly getting an immediate rematch with Sean Strickland, regardless of what any of us think. And also, I wanted to kind of lump this in. This is another reason, but I'll lump it in with this. This could be the end of an era. Honestly, this could be the end of an era, and I talked about it. We have to appreciate these special fighters during these special times, because at a snap of a finger and at a drop of a hat, those reigns can end and they can go downhill and they're never the same again. This may have been the case with Adesanya, because if Adesanya loses a second time to Sean Strickland, where does he go from there? There's nowhere to go. And we may have very well seen the beginning of the end of Israel Adesanya at UFC 293. And I talk about it all the time. When we see these special fighters, we have to appreciate them in the present, because you never know when this is going to happen. I've talked about it with Volkanovski. I've talked about it with so many other fighters. And it's crazy, because if he gets this rematch and loses, he's really he's in Max Holloway territory. There's nowhere for him to go. So I wanted to mention that as well. Moving on to my number one takeaway from UFC 293. A lot of people thought that I was upset with the outcome of the main event, which is just completely untrue. The outcome of the main event of UFC 293 is the exact reason I love the sport. You never know what's going to happen. And the main event of UFC 293, the only reason I was disappointed in Adesanya losing at all is because I really wanted Adesanya versus du Plessis. And I talked about it in the last month or two, and I've talked about all these different ways that fight may never happen. It may never happen. I think I even made a video and I titled it that as well. I know I made a video about it, but I think I titled about it. Adesanya versus du Plessis may never happen. And now it legitimately may never happen. But as much as that sucks, it makes me love the sport when you have these massive underdogs go out there and pull off a victory when nobody expects them to win. I mean, what made me fall in love with this sport to begin with all the way back in like 2010 was when Anderson Silva was getting beat up for 25 minutes. In the last minute of the fight, he pulls off a triangle choke against Chael Sonnen. That's what cemented me as a hardcore fan. And just to see somebody so counted out like Sean Strickland, like, I literally couldn't conjure up a path to victory. I knew he had to, if he won, he had to win probably by decision, but I just couldn't fathom him going out there and outstriking him to a decision win, let alone 4-1, let alone uncontroversially winning the fight. But these are the type of outcomes that really make you love the sport. I'll never forget UFC 173. I'm not even a fan of TJ Dillashaw at the time. He was considered a lamb being led to the slaughter. He wasn't even supposed to get the title shot against Renan Barão. And he went out there and beat the brakes off of Renan Barão to become bantamweight champion. Iconic moment. And the list goes on and on. We've seen so many people count it out. Not to the same extent as Strickland in this instance, but Sean O'Malley. Sean O'Malley against Aljamain Sterling. A lot of people were counting him out. He went out there and not only got it done, but got it done by stoppage. This is what makes the sport of MMA so great. You don't know what's going to happen on any given Saturday night. You can do all this research. You can watch a bunch of film, but MMA, sometimes it just makes no sense at all. And that's what makes the sport so amazing. That's what makes me love the sport so much. So as disappointed as I am that we're not going to get to see Israel Adesanya versus Dricus du Plessis or Israel Adesanya versus Khamzat Chimaev in the near future, it could still potentially happen down the line. It's still crazy to see a guy like Sean Strickland who, he's coming off a win over an unranked Abus Magomedov where he was getting destroyed in the first round and Abus gassed out. He finishes him. To take that opportunity against Abus where people were kind of questioning why is he taking this fight, coming off of a short notice fight against Nasruddin Imavov. Talk about the weirdest winning streak. He took a short notice fight against Nasruddin, then he beat Abus Magomedov, and now he fought Israel Adesanya and takes the middleweight belt off him. I mean, nobody predicted Sean Strickland UFC champion in 2023. I would have never guessed him even getting a title shot, at least not at the end of last year. I could have guessed it, maybe 2-3 months ago. But the sport is crazy. It's why I love the sport, and it just reminded me why I am so in love with MMA. But let me know what you guys think of my takeaways. Is there anything I missed? What did you guys take away from UFC 293? Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe, and thank you so much for watching.